So I am program manager for a program called Our Water, Our World, which is a program designed to bring awareness between pesticides and water quality. We are IPM educators that work with the general public every single day, talking to you about how we reduce pesticides, solve pest problems for long-term results and for sustainability. And what we're going to learn today are the principles of how to garden less toxically, how your garden is a dynamic ecosystem, and why working with IPM, with an IPM approach, equals less pests. Pests, not pets. So what is IPM? It's actually Integrated Pest Management. And what Integrated Pest Management is a way we solve pest problems in the professional garden industry. So we're going to look at the system as a whole. So that would be your garden, it could be your home, but we're going to focus on garden today. And we're going to understand all of the diversities of that garden. And when we have a problem, it's usually an indicator or symptoms. Our garden shows us signs when something might be out of balance. And that's when we really want to hone in and look at what that problem might be. And then we decide, can we live with it? Because oftentimes we understand that the balance in the garden is going to adjust itself and take over and correct itself. However, if it's a situation we can't live with, then we need to take some action. And those actions are going to be either cultural controls, mechanical controls, biological controls, or chemical controls. Now in this case, chemical controls, I'm referring to eco-friendly pesticides, but I still am going to encourage all of us to reduce the use of eco-friendly pesticides, because guess what? We can garden and we can grow beautiful food without pesticides, but we still need to use them on occasion. And then in the event that the plant really just isn't working and it's always struck with some type of a problem, give yourself permission to just remove it. It's that simple. So let's dive into some of these. So cultural controls. I like to consider this to be the health of the garden or the health of the environment. So when we spend a lot of time and energy increasing the health of the garden, guess what? We're reducing pest problems. It starts with the soil. So we've already heard a lot of really great stories about how important soil is. I'd like to share that every single one of our gardens is going to be different than the other person's. We live in this really dynamic Bay Area where we're faced with a lot of different microclimates and a lot of different types of soil. So have an idea of what kind of soil you have is going to help you identify how we're going to water, because yes, most of us are going to overwater, and some of us are even going to underwater. So when we can, and watering is actually, incorrect watering is the #1 reason why plants fail. So when we understand what type of soil we have, it's going to help us later when we then go to try to water our plants, irrigate them, or fertilize them, or grow different types of varieties. And then from there, we want to build healthy soils. We want to inoculate the soils with microbiology, with beneficial bacteria and beneficial fungi. We want to add soil amendment or compost. If we don't have luxury of creating compost on site, we can buy really good quality compost at our local retail markets. It's also going to be called soil amendment or planting mix. These are all going to be similar things that are going to equate to compost. Please read the bags if we are buying bag material, because the list of ingredients is going to be on the bag, and many of our local soils, bag products that we're getting are OMRI certified and also CBFA. So these are organic certifications that we can see on the bags. We want to work with organic fertilizers, and we've heard that a couple times already also. The reason why we want to work with organic fertilizers is because it's actually supporting the microbiology that's in the soil. We really want to get off those synthetic fertilizers, anything that we add water to that turns blue. We really want to just be away with it. I know we sometimes still have that little arsenal in the corner of the pantry that's hidden behind the organics just so no one sees it. But understand that synthetic fertilizers, one thing that makes them fast acting is that they're high in salts. Salts are detrimental to our soils. So over time, the plants might look fantastic and we might get a lot of blooms and it's going to be dynamic, but over time it's not going to be sustainable for our gardens or for our soils. Another thing that synthetic fertilizers do is they kind of act like steroids, and they push a lot of new growth that's full of sugars. And guess what likes to eat sugary, sweet new growth? Insects. Not just aphids, but all of those insects we're going to see in the garden that are problems. So when we can reduce and eliminate synthetic fertilizers and focus on organic fertilizers, and let me tell you, there are so many beautiful, high-quality organic fertilizers around all of the retail markets. There's really no reason why we shouldn't be using them, but we're going to be able to bolster the health of our plants. And when we have healthy plants, they're able to withstand a lot of stresses during times of maybe drought or times of, I don't know, other things that could be happening in the garden. So, oh, and then mulch. Okay, mulch is also going to be really fantastic. We want to protect our soils, okay? And the way we do it is by adding mulch. We don't have to mulch the entire garden. In fact, it's recommended that a section of the garden stays raw and uncultivated to attract and promote the habitat for native bees that are ground dwellers and such. But it is nice in the areas of our garden that we are really actively working through is to mulch the areas. It's going to protect the soil as mulch decomposes. It's adding organic matter to the soil, which is a win-win. And then I'll share that mulch is going to keep the soil cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Unless you live in San Francisco, then it's the opposite. And then we're going to also know that mulch can provide some habitat for some of our beneficial insects, especially if it's the chunky arbor mulch. And then of course it reduces water evaporation rate. We're going to reduce water evaporation rate by over 70% by mulch, adding a layer of mulch in the garden, which equates to a 30% water savings on the outdoor water usage of the water bill. So it is really fantastic. It's a win-win. And something I forgot to mention about compost, or when we amend the soil, no matter what type of soil we have, if it's the sandy soil, if it's the clay soil, if it's anything cruddy in between, even beautiful loamy soil, compost corrects every situation. So if we want to increase the health of our soil, we're always going to have compost. I forgot to mention that. Okay, this is kind of cool. So when we're adding compost to our soils or inoculating it with like mycorrhizal fungi or organic fertilizers now have a lot of organic or beneficial bacteria and fungi in the mixes, this is what we're creating. We're actually, I like to call the beneficial bacteria and fungi the nutrient transport enhancement systems, because they are actually working with the root systems of our plants. There's a symbiotic relationship that occurs that helps break down toxins and pollutants, holds the soil together, but then also allows for better nutrient uptake and water uptake. So how many of us like to, I'm assuming, how many of us will plant fava beans in the gardens as like a cover crop? Okay, awesome. Aren't they fantastic? So I'm a huge fan of fava beans. And not only are they fantastic for increasing the health of the soil and adding nitrogen to the soil, but as they start to grow, guess what? How many of us actually eat the tips of the fava beans? Yes, aren't they delicious, sauteed with some garlic and sesame oil? I just love them. But if we are using, or if we're growing fava beans as a cover crop to support the structure and health of the soil, we do want to make sure before they go full-blown flower stage, we want to cut them at the base of the soil so that nitrogen-fixed bacteria stays in the soil. If we let it go to seed and grow the bean, which we'll want to, maybe some of the plants will want to grow the beans so we have them for the next session, understand that all that nitrogen will come up through the soil, through the root system, into that plant to create that bean. So just so you know, not a lot of people consider that, so I just like to point that out. And then on this side we have a root system. It's actually that kind of darker tan is the main, like the T in the middle, in the top. That was the original root of this plant. And with the mycorrhizal fungi, it has grown this nice network of webbing around and beyond the root system, kind of creating a bottle brush. This allows for more nutrient uptake and more water uptake. So this is actually going to be beneficial for those times when we are possibly moving into a drier season, maybe a drought. It's going to help our plants stay very hydrated. Okay, from there we want to plant the right plant in the right place. So we've heard a lot about native plants, California native plants. I also support Mediterranean native plants that are going to work well in our environments, that are not going to be invasive in any way. But understand, I'll just share, for most of my adult life, I lived in San Francisco, and I sadly just had a little concrete pad between two very tall buildings of the apartments. And so even though I just wanted to have some sun in the ground to grow some beautiful sun-loving plants, I became an expert at shade container gardening. So we have to work with what we've got, because if we don't, we're going to just invite other problems. So I'm all for pushing limits, but understand that when we push limits, we could be also faced with maybe some disease problems or some more some insect problems, because the plant could be stressed. And then of course, if we want to try to correct that problem, if we are not planting the right plant in the right place, if we want to try to correct that problem, then we'll have to go to a pesticide. So if we want to avoid using pesticides altogether, and we want to create a healthy, happy, biodiverse habitat in our gardens, then always focus on planting the right plant in the right place. Now sometimes the neighbors will grow some trees that when we moved in or when we started our garden, there was a nice sunny area, but over time, all of a sudden now our sunny area is shaded. That happens. Sadly, then we have to adjust to that situation, and yeah, we have to always be kind of looking at our gardens in new ways, new lights, and make the changes that are needed, and kind of move with the times. Growing biodiversity to support pollinators and beneficial insects. So these are just a couple of plant lists that I like to reference. I'm sure you're familiar with at least the first two. How many of you are familiar with BASPA, the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency? I know no one knows about it. It's kind of cool. But they have, I mean, it's kind of cool program or a resource, but no one knows about it, which is very strange. But not so different from the Marin Water District. But they have a really cool plant list on there that's all going to be water-wise plants that grow really well in our Bay Area. We want to plant with, plants with similar water needs need to be planted together. So we're not going to plant the lavender next to maybe a lawn, if you still have that lawn, or if we've got water or thirsty plants. I can't even think of any because I've been doing. Thank you. Yeah, so we don't want to plant plants that really like a lot of water next to plants that don't want a lot of water, because again, it's going to be a recipe for disaster. This picture here, so teaching people how to water is one of the hardest things for us as educators to translate. So because we don't see what's going on under the soil, right? We're just seeing what's going on the top of the soil. And we think we're doing a really good job, and I'm sure most of us really are. However, though I've been working as a professional gardener and educator for over 25 years, I still get stumped by some soil conditions, even though I think I know better. So a couple things I want to share is, remember that roots are only going to go where water goes. So, so when we're watering shallowly, and a lot of times our irrigation systems are set up for when the plants were first planted and not set up for when the plants have grown and have become established. So when we water shallowly and just focusing water on the top couple inches of the soil, the roots are really only going to stay there, okay? So what we want to do is we want to start to encourage the root systems to grow deeply and to grow out, deeply and out. So as plants grow, it takes 1 to 2 years for plants to become established. As plants grow, we want to make sure we're taking those emitters on the irrigation system and bringing them out towards the drip line of the plant. And we want to be increasing the time of water. We want to bring more volume of water out as the plant grows, because we want to coax those root systems to go down and out, down and out. And then once the plant is established, we're going to set up our watering systems and have a strategy where we're watering deeply, and we're not watering again until the top few inches is dry. So guess what? We're using less water, and we're having healthier and happier plants. This is an aerial view. Yes, it's of a tree from the Vacaville Tree Foundation, but I'd like you to imagine this could be a perennial, this could be a shrub, it could be a tree. And what we want to do is note that the irrigation is focused out at the drip line and beyond, because that's where the new fibrous root systems are. And those new little fibrous root systems are the ones that are taking up water and nutrients. Also imagine, Mother Nature is pretty darn smart. If we've ever been on a hike and all of a sudden a little rain system came through, and you can imagine ducking under a tree until that rain system passes, we can stay dry. The water is sheeting off the canopy of the tree and coming down here to the root system. Isn't that amazing? So we want to try to mimic that in our gardens. Okay, irrigation systems. Yes, when we don't have rains to water our plants, we will want to supplement that water with irrigation systems. However, irrigation systems are not set it and forget it systems, okay? Just gotta say that again. We need to change the clocks, the irrigation systems, as we change seasons. And the seasons are going to be dictated by lower daylight hours or longer daylight hours. If we've had rains, if we haven't had rains. And if we only have one zone, that means the irrigation system is only going to there's only one channel. Then we want to set it for the lowest water needs. Because remember I said we want to plant plants with the same water needs together, but we don't always do that. So we want to focus and gauge that clock to what is the minimum amount of water that the garden needs, and then we can hand water the plants that need a little extra water, okay? The reason why irrigation systems can be very effective and efficient and help us save water is that we're able to focus the water just in the area of the plants we want to water. We're not watering other areas of the garden that might attract weeds. So when we work with irrigation systems, they can be localized, they can be very effective, and we're reducing weeds and other unwanted plants in areas where we're not watering. We also want to have the irrigation set up where it's emitters that are in direct contact with the soil, and get away from the pop-up sprinklers. I know pop-up sprinklers were really popular through the 90s, but I think pretty much through the 2000s we've been changing those out to be just emitters. So if you haven't done that yet, it's really easy. Go to the Urban Farmers store in Mill Valley and they can totally hook you up. And then also the best time of day to water is in the early morning when the soils are still cool and the air temperatures are cool. And this is going to be, just ideal. And then another thing to remember is that if we're faced with hard clay or really challenging soil where water isn't percolating in very well, irrigation clocks can actually be set up for multiple times. So it allows us to pulse the water out. And so what does that mean? I've got a hillside and I want to water the new plants I just planted. But after about 5 minutes, I noticed that the water is no longer saturating in the soil. It's starting to run down the hill. So that's my indicator. 5 minutes is the threshold. So I'm going to set my clock for 5 minutes. After about 15 minutes, when that water's been able to saturate in, I'm going to have it come back on for another 5 minutes. And then I'm going to turn it off and let it set for 15 minutes. And have it come back on for another 5 minutes, because what I know, if I've got a 1 gallon per hour emitter on my irrigation line and I know I need to get at least a half a gallon of water out for this particular plant, 5 minutes isn't going to do it because, pardon me, my math might be wrong, but I think that's only going to be about a half a cup of water if it's 5 minutes at 1 gallon per hour. My point is, not to get too crazy with math, is that irrigation clocks allow us now to pulse the water out so we're not going to have excess water running down the hill or running into the sidewalk or down into the storm drain. Isn't that cool? Something else I wanted to point out, if we have no idea what kind of soil we have, I encourage you to go home and just dig a hole that's about the size of a gallon, fill it up with water, and then time how fast it takes to drain. That's really going to help identify what's going on underneath. And if we have an irrigation system set up right now, and we have it set for, let's say, 3 times a week for 20 minutes, just because that's what the landscape gardener said, well, goes off on Monday morning at 6 a.m. for 20 minutes. Let's go outside and look around. Did that time really efficiently water everything that needed to get watered? Let's get our trowel, let's dig in, let's see how deep did that water get. Okay, it looked like it did a great job. Supposed to come on again at Wednesday at 6 a.m. Well, you don't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to check, but maybe the night before. Let's look around. Is the soil dry? Does it really need to come on again? Maybe it's actually going to be set up for Monday and Thursday, twice a week. So investigate, check out what's going on so that we can actually be a little bit more effective with our gardening, or with our watering. Another part of cultural control is the sanitation. So we want to make sure that we're cleaning up the fallen fruit, any like apples that are left on the trees from the season before, let's get them into the green can and off-site unless we have really active hot compost systems. Let's get any tomatoes that were on the plants from the season before off-site, because these are going to be vectors for yellow jackets, rats, mice, and such. And then of course fungal spores, black spot, rust, powdery mildew, peach leaf curl. We want to remove these leaves because when we're leaving them on site, even if they fall into the ground, if we happen to get rain or hand water, these spores can splash back up onto the plant. All right, that was cultural controls. That's a big category, increasing the health of our gardens. Now mechanical controls. These are actually the tools we use to prevent pest problems. So we can work with barriers such as bird netting to prevent the birds from eating our delicious peaches or cherries. We're going to work with gopher baskets to prevent gophers from eating the root systems, copper tape to prevent slugs and snails, deer fencing, screens in the window to prevent flying insects, row cover, things like that. Exclusion baskets. I call these things exclusion baskets. It's 1/4-inch hardware cloth on like 1x1 frames. I work with a lot of clients that grow food, and rats seem to be the #1 thing that likes to eat their food. So if we have exclusion baskets that lift up and are portable and move around, it kind of helps prevent some pests to take care of, to eat the food they want to eat. Sheet mulching is also an incredible barrier that also, as the cardboard starts to decompose, it adds organic matter to the soil, reduces weeds, increases the health. Working with traps, we've got all types of traps out there. If we haven't put our yellow jacket traps out yet, this is the time. The queens are emerging. And so for every queen that we collect, it's thousands of yellow jackets we've eliminated. And then biological controls. This is actually my favorite category. What we want to do is plant a diversity of flowers that look like sunflowers or daisies, or clusters of little flowers. So we've got the Origeron, we've got Cosmos. These are all going to be flowers that attract the micropollinators and the microbeneficial insects, the yarrow and the alyssum. Why? Because there are a lot of tiny, tiny, tiny little flowers within the clusters. And these are all the guys that we want to see in the garden. We have given you all this 10 most wanted. We're going to identify what the larvae look like from the adult bugs to help us identify that they're actually good bugs and not bad ones eating them. And then I also gave you guys a Healthy Gardens handout. Beyond the Healthy Gardens handout are some resources such as the Our Water, Our World website. On the website, there's a link that says Ask the Expert. If you happen to come upon a pest or an insect or a disease that you're unsure about, you can always email them and ask them about it. So it's a resource at your fingertips. The UCIPM website is also listed here as a resource, which is going to be really great because they're also here in a Mediterranean climate just like us. Growing biodiversity, we're going to invite the birds, offer a water source, all those fun things we just talked about. And then last but not least, it's chemical controls. So even though we are possibly going to reach for an eco-friendly product, what I'm going to invite you to do is, number one, understand and know what the pest is. Because if we don't know what the pest is, we're not going to be able to resolve it or manage it with an eco-friendly pesticide. We want to always make sure our beneficial insects are not present, because guess what? Beneficial insects are not going to withstand insecticidal soap or neem or any of those nice eco-friendlies that we might use. We always want to spray towards the end of the day. I always like to say after those 4 o'clock winds have died down, and you know, when the pollinators and beneficial insects are going to be less likely active. And then, yeah, that's about it on that one. Okay, reduce pesticides. Yay. Okay, I want to go through this one really quick because I only have a couple minutes. But the number one pest problem we're all faced with right now is rats. Sorry if anyone's offended by that photo. But what we want to do is make sure we work with exclusion and remove their food sources. Rats seem to be the number one pest problem right now because we are all over the place. We have growing food. We have compost systems that are not contained. We have chickens and chicken coops that are not contained. So what we want to do is prevent them from getting into our areas, and then we also want to make sure we are very persistent and aggressive with working with kill traps. So this is the other part of the equation that we get a little nervous and queasy about. But I can assure you that when we can exclude them from the areas, plugging up any holes in the house with 1/4 inch hardware cloth or that sheet metal roof flashing, because anything else, know that they will chew through. Yes, they chew through steel wool. And then working with traps, make sure that you are baiting the trap first before you set it. Rodents are very suspicious of new things. Just because you put that trap out there with a little bit of peanut butter doesn't mean they're going to go for it. And also give yourself permission to expand beyond peanut butter, because if they saw their buddy die eating the peanut butter, they're telling everybody else, dude, peanut butter is off. We are not going for that. So go for a little piece of a Slim Jim or like a meat stick. Go for a chewy granola bar, kitty kibble, dog kibble, chicken feed. What are they already eating? That's what we're going to bait the traps with. Once we start baiting traps, we need to monitor them. We don't get to walk away for a couple days. Once we have a kill, we want to put it in a bag, close it up, put it in the garbage, and then we trap.
Why are we putting it in a bag?
Because if it's not in a bag, you're going to be possibly a vector for more problems.
I'm just getting at plastic use, but that's another.
No, it doesn't have to be plastic,
Okay.
paper bag.
Thank you.
And if you live in a property where you've got like the back 40 where you can bury it, bury it. Outside, we want to remove the harborage. We want to contain our compost. That means the compost bins have to be floor, ceiling, and wall of 1/4 inch hardware cloth. We want to make sure we can lock it also to make sure that the raccoons and other critters aren't getting into it. We want to keep lids on our garbage cans. We would like to ask that people are not putting food out for feral cats or feeding your pets outside, but I know that's not always possible. So maybe limit the amount of time that the food is outside. Maybe just limit it to 30 minutes or an hour, because guess what? If it's feral cats, they're smart. They're going to know when dinner time is. We want to rethink bird feeders, okay? And then we also want to create barriers for the rodents that are getting into our gardens. Was that it? The exclusion baskets, again, are going to prevent them from eating the food. And yeah, let's recap. We're going to check our irrigation systems. We're going to periodically prune deadwood out and prune plants away from the house, okay? Prune the trees, get them limbed up so they still look beautiful, but then they're also not going to have a lot of deadwood, which also is going to be a fire hazard, right? We want to weed when the little weeds first shoot right after the rainy season, and not go out there in the middle of like March when the weeds are knee high and go, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this, overwhelming. Because yes, it is overwhelming. And then we want to monitor for pest problems and enjoy the garden. So in close, when we try to pick out anything else by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. Yes, everything is connected. everything, everything. So I'd like to thank you very much for IPM Basics 101 in 15 or 20 minutes. That was very fast and speedy. We are here